number, but standing at a funny angle. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. So Nexwell, we're in the decarbonization space. We have a track record now. I'll speak. Actually, the only reason I'm up here is for Anka's sake, because you guys were questioning the ability to scale from 50 million tons to 250 million tons, and rest assured, we will get there. Anyway, before we start, they told me there's a little mic option here. Let's see. All right, let's see if I can get this thing to work. Okay.
This is an awareness test.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to.
How many times does the team in white pass the ball?
Basketball. See if you guys can. Making sure you're awake.
If you answered 13 passes, you are.
Okay. Everybody got 13? Yeah, 12, 13. Yeah. You guys did okay. Now, did anybody notice anything else? Yes. You've seen this before, haven't you? Okay. Anyone who hasn't seen this before, noticed anything else? No? Okay. There was a gorilla walking through
Are correct.
and moonwalking in the background.
Did you see the moonwalking gorilla?
Backing up. Like all there. Fine. Hold it an hour. There's a reason that gorilla was walking through there today. It's very easy to get focused on burying 50 million tons or 250 million tons and forgetting to look to your left and to your right to see what's happening around you, because there's lots of enabling technologies that are happening left and right. And that has been the secret of the success of Nexwell. Nexwell in a prior, shall we say, incorporation was called Synetics. And before that, I started up AES Solar. Each one of those went to become multi-billion-dollar platforms and scaling at, shall we say, 2x per year, so 100% growth per year. In industries that at the time when I started in solar, it cost, I would say, it costs about double or triple the cost of a nuclear plant to put up a solar plant equivalent. And so you have Nexwell. We've set a goal for ourselves that by the end of the next decade, we're going to be responsible for 1 billion tons of CO2 sequestered. And whereas that may seem super aspirational to you guys, because we're looking at real volumes today at millions of tons going in, one of our solar companies is now responsible for displacing at least 1 million tons a year. And even though that's going to take 1,000 years to get to 1 billion tons, and the plants don't last that long, the large part of the solution ends up in carbon sequestration and underground storage. So Nexwell, outward focused, inward focused, some of the companies we run. We also have a foundation, non-for-profit. Just a little bit of growth really, really quickly. You can see we've done repeatedly. Before this was AES Solar. That grew even faster over a 2-year period. I grew that to €1 billion from my first euro being done between me and 2 other human beings, secretary and project finance person. So, and again, in the early days of solar, where solar was kind of the hobbyist space, where people put solar panels on cabins in the woods because they were too expensive to put anywhere else, as sort of a last resort. Today, solar is so cheap, and I will talk to that. And part of the reason people couldn't see it back then is because humans have a really hard time with exponential growth. We skip past this. Tons of different things are converging all at once. But just 5 years ago, Bloomberg New Energy Finance, which is considered sort of the Bible of what's happening in the renewable world, at least in the solar industry, forecast 13 trillion to be invested in power generation over the next 32 years, and another 11 trillion in kind of grid upgrades. So 25 trillion over 25 years, just under $1 trillion a year. So fast forward that movie by just 5 years, right? Trillion. Now, 6 over 32 years, right? So 6 and 5, that's faster than the 25 trillion. But what do they do when they get things wrong? Well, then they add a new category. So they now added electrified transport to kind of justify this crazy amount of investment and to justify why their numbers weren't right to begin with. Now, you'd think, and I just Googled nonsensical charts, and that's probably the retention speed, number of days for which you guys will remember this presentation, not too many on the right. But the whole point is that even if you add in EVs, they were saying 25 trillion, add in EVs, which was roughly a third of what was on the previous slide, that comes to 37 and a half. Divide that by 32 years over the time period they talked about, that would have been 1.2 trillion a year. Last year alone, we invested 1.8 trillion, right? So we already know the forecasts are wrong. So Richard Feynman, physicist, I don't know if any of you guys follow him, but he's got phenomenal stuff out there, tons of good stuff to read. Anyway, we're super easy to fool. And the reason we're easy to fool is because we don't actually understand exponential growth very well. So this, I'm sure you guys have seen, this is from Tony Seba. This is New York City, 1900s, okay? In the photograph up there, there's one automobile, one Ford Model T. 13 years later, there's one horse left at the Macy's Day Parade, right? Change happens super, super fast. So if you look at rates of change of adoption, all of these technologies, which we take for granted today, happen incredibly quickly from zero to full adoption within a 10 to 13 year period, with the exception of like aviation, which you can see is the light blue line, which a lot of regulation, a few crashes, slowed that industry down a little bit, but essentially most of them happen super, super quick. And it's because we don't understand exponential growth. And I'll give you one little quote here. So 1 year after the Wright brothers took to the skies, right, when asked about the future of aviation, very far future is what people talked about, right? Basically saying never, it'll never happen, right? What do we know? Aviation, it took it about 40 years to become kind of a global phenomenon. So going back to solar, right? This is IEA, right? The International Energy Agency. 13 years in a row, this was their forecast for new solar additions. This is, right? Because people don't understand exponential growth, and I'll explain that why. So here you have 1976, the first panel's coming out, right? All the way till 2024. You have to plot this stuff out on a logarithmic scale because we're talking about percentages of change, right? We're talking about doublings of things, and we're talking about halvings of prices. So if you had a dollar today and you lost 50%, you'd be left with 50 cents. If you gain 50%, you'd only be back at 75. So it's not a normal relationship. It's not a linear relationship. It's a log normal relationship. So if you plot it on logs, you start getting straight lines. And if you actually forecast your logs, you say, I have been learning. Every time I build it, I go from 1,000 to 2,000, right? My price should go down by 29% if I look at the full data set. Problem is, in 2008, that line would have been a lot less steep. What people haven't noticed, and if you projected that line today, you'd be at about 40 cents. But what they have to notice is there was a technology step change that happened in this period of investment, where now all of a sudden this angle of attack has increased from 29% per doubling to 38% per doubling. That translates, because the doublings are happening so fast in this industry, that translates, instead of going down 12% a year, it's 21% a year, right? Twice the rate of price reductions. What does that mean? Well, when Bloomberg New Energy Finance forecasts back in 2018, so it's just 5 years ago, they said if this computer solar in the US costs 40 euros, 4 cents a kilowatt. Break even with variable cost of gas. So in China, sorry, gas in the US, sorry, 30, coal in China, 40. 2030 for natural gas. What do we know today? In 2018, oops, I skipped a couple slides. Anyway, this is one of my favorite slides, which is if you plan according to this, right, what's going to happen is your plan's not going to work, right? And Mike Tyson, I think, said it best. He said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, okay? So I did my math back in 2018, as I did back in 2012, back in 2006. My math told me 2022, we're going to be breaking. Bloomberg New Energy had it out of 26, 27, depending on how you do the math. I corrected some of their forecasts where they were wrong, because they actually submit the Excels to you. You can review them. So for me, 2022, we knew we were going to be break even. But this only looks one-dimensional. It only looks at solar PV. What else is happening? If you look at those same logarithmic relationships across solar, wind, batteries, electrolyzers, you name it, They all follow the same relationships. Why wouldn't they behave in the same way? And that's where exponential growth and our ability to understand exponential growth is so powerful. So when you take that exponential growth, here's your 2022, right? Crossover of solar with natural gas in the US or coal and gas in Europe, right? It's already happened, right? Guess what? Solar and batteries, 24/7 solar and batteries. Now, granted, some days it won't be sunny, right? And if you're in Norway, let's not count on solar, but our CCUS project is in Spain. So when I'm forecasting my power needs for my CCUS, I'm looking at a 100% renewable solution by 2026. I won't have a well that's operating by 2026. It won't be till probably 2029 or 2030, right? We're looking to get about 1 million tons, maybe a little more if we're lucky, a year. To meet the energy needs of that, I'm going to be at 2 cents a kilowatt, 24/7 with predictive weather forecasting. I can put a trading desk in place to fill the gaps when the sun isn't going to shine, right? So there'll be some cost to buying power during times when there isn't enough solar. But the reality is that's within 90% reliability for the year, right? So I'm only dependent 10% on the grid, and I am sub-utility cost everywhere, pretty much in the southern hemisphere, or call it from the 35th parallel and down, right? So middle of France and down, we can provide 24/7. That's if you combine technologies, right? So for me, CCUS, which is essentially an energy intensive business, is going to need cheap energy. And you have lots of people around you that are trying to make this happen. So I urge you, let's not get stuck in figuring out, and I know we have to figure out just how much cracking is going to happen subsurface and how much gas we can get down there. But the climate threat is equally important and equally urgent. So we might not get it right the first time, but if we don't start moving on this, um, I'm concerned. Number one, because well, this is good stuff; it's happening, right? But the way I look at it is, we're today at over 400 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere. Bring it back to the 60s, 320 parts per million. That's 800 billion tons that need to go underground, right? 800 billion tons of excess emissions that have happened over the last 50, 60 years that we need to erase. And that's not going to happen for free, guys. We actually have to go out there and just do it. And today, CCUS might not be economically viable, as solar was not economically viable in 2006 and 7 when it started. But today, it is cheaper than any other power on the planet, and it requires no subsidies at all to function, versus the oil and gas industry still gets subsidized today, which is mind-boggling to me. Hey, so that's the goal. And so I had a ton of slides prepared for kind of how to build a scalable company and stuff like that when I thought I had an hour to speak. So this is pretty much it. So before you step into the ring, make sure you look around and make sure you're fit for what you're up against. Because if Mike Tyson's standing in there, you better get training now because it's going to be tough. And yes, it's going to be a tough race, right? It's trying to balance regulation with speed and trying to balance the solutions the planet needs with the solutions we have. And unfortunately, none of it is perfect yet, but I have great hope. Like, so for me, we can, there's a little outfit out of MIT right now that's called Quaise Energy. They have drilled all of 30 centimeters today, but they have the drilling cost. They have a plasma drill. Essentially, they lower a coil with a 1 megawatt power plant, and they lower it. They have to do conventional drilling to about 2 kilometers, and then they lower the drill, and it's supposed to vaporize the rock, and they can bring it down 20 kilometers. So pretty much a geothermal well anywhere on the planet, next to every coal plant in the world, free fuel for that coal plant for the rest of its life, for the rest of its useful life, emissions free. That company has a drilling cost of $1 million a kilometer. That is a drop in the bucket compared to the cost of bringing the coal to the coal plant, forgetting the cost of coal itself. Just the transport cost alone costs more than that. So for me, when companies like that are at the verge of essentially turning around an entire industry, creating a geothermal well at every single coal plant in the world, I think there's hope. But in the interim, we better hold on to as much CO2 as we can and prevent it from emitting. And the only way we do that is to get it underground. Because right now, Elon Musk being responsible for making the electric car sexy and having every car manufacturer in the world turning electric isn't going to save us. Power companies going green overnight isn't going to save us. Why? Well, you've got generative AI now consuming more power. I mean, we've had power increases for the first time, a rise in power demand in 20 years. Why? because we're addicted to our stupid cell phones, right? So I wish we were a little bit better custodians of our planet, and I wish we could do things better. But bottom line is, there are people out there like us who want this to happen. We're in the carbon space. We don't know what the hell we're doing. We rely on you guys for help, and vice versa. We can help you guys a lot. We know how to scale companies. We've taken multiple companies on growth spurts that most people would envy, and very successfully. We have zero dead bodies in our track yard. We're very good at kind of delivering on results. We measure everything. We're not scientists. We're not geologists, thankfully. I'm not saying that as a criticism to anyone here, but at least that training doesn't get in our way of breaking things and doing. I guess if we always did it right and we always had 100% certainty, we wouldn't get to the finish line most of the time. So I'll close with one quote, which is, and it's by Wordsworth, and it's, they only achieved it because nobody told them it was impossible. And I think CCUS is one of those. We cannot believe that it is impossible. So Anke, when you say 50 million tons by 2030, I welcome it. I think we'll get there. So thank you.